The following program is brought to you by the University of Alabama.
Almost every one of Lee Smith's 16 volumes of fiction is set in her native, beloved Appalachia, the source of her inspiration. So, when her hometown of Grundy, Virginia, was scheduled to be moved uphill and the original site flooded, Smith did all she could to save the essence and spirit of the place. The result is Sitting on the Courthouse Bench, an Oral History. Her new novel, Guests on Earth, is set in Asheville, North Carolina. And besides the mountaineers we have come to expect, a major character is Alabama's Zelda Fitzgerald, a mental patient at the Highland Hospital. I spoke with Lee Smith at the studios of Alabama Public Television in Montgomery, Alabama. Lee, it's good to see you again.
Thank you.
It's been a while. How long do you think it's been?
I can't even remember. Of course, we've known each other since we were really young, faculty at the University of Alabama, so
Yeah,
I'm not even sure.
I was looking on my bookshelf, and I'm looking at some of your books, and some of them are signed by Lee Smith with her left hand, because I think the last time we spoke, your right arm was broken, your right wrist was broken.
That's right. Yeah.
And it's all healed up.
It's fine. Right.
Actually, I would ask, how are you? But I know that you're well because
I'm fine.
Because I've run into half of your friends in the last 6
That's
months.
right. That's
All
right.
The Hillsborough Chapel Hill gang.
Yeah.
They're all of you are thriving.
Well, we're having a good time.
Yeah. New books, and you have a new book, which is why you're on tour
Yes.
and here in Montgomery. What are you going to do for the Fitzgerald Society, the International Fitzgerald Society tomorrow? What are you going to do?
Well, I'm going to read from the book,
Yeah.
and then just mainly I'm here to see what they have to say. So I'm going to be attending the conference, and I just want to go to all these places again and just be here and just sort of soak up as much Fitzgerald and particularly as much Zelda as I could get.
Your new book has Zelda as a character.
It
and
does.
I want to talk about that, but I want to spend a couple of minutes with a book of yours that is now a dozen years old,
Right.
which I did not know about. I saw a reference to it sitting on the courthouse steps.
Yeah.
The story, the oral history of Grundy, Virginia, and I thought, I'd never seen this. So I got a copy and read it.
Yeah.
And it's your hometown, Grundy.
This is my hometown, which is, of course, a small, really small mining town in southwest Virginia, very close to eastern Kentucky. So if you want to know what it's like there, think eastern Kentucky, think coal miner's daughter.
Okay.
You know, that's the terrain, all mountains. And it had repeatedly flooded, partially because the terrain is so up and down, partially because of some unwise mining practices and just the location of the town where two rivers come together. So it had repeatedly flooded, and suddenly they got the money to have a big new project of widening the river, demolishing the town as it was, and making a flat place and raising all the businesses up to higher ground, like in the gospel song.
They're going to move the town.
No, they were going to move the town up like this. And so this was supposed to happen real fast. And so being a merchant's daughter, my dad had his dime store for 53 years in the middle of the town. And I really wanted an oral history of merchants and people who had lived in town. And so I talked to my best friend in the world, who is still the high school teacher in Grundy, still today. And we got her students to participate and worked out a way for them to get credit. And we embarked real fast upon an oral history project because we thought this was going to be imminent. As it turned out, the economy was in bad shape and things took a long time to happen, so we didn't have to be in so much of a hurry. But now I'm so glad we did it because lots of those older folks are gone. now.
Yes, of course.
And the town is gone entirely. It's a wide river and a higher level where the merchants were supposed to go up.
But they didn't?
They didn't, because the town fathers invited Walmart to come. It's the only town in the country that has invited Walmart to come.
So you got one Walmart
We've
instead
got
of 14 other stores.
enormous Walmart.
Oh my gosh.
It's a 3-story Walmart. It's the first 2 floors are parking garage, and then there's Walmart, and you take your groceries up and down on enormous escalators with platforms so your cart can go to. It's spooky. It's so weird, and it looks like a kind of a spaceship has landed on that flat space. So. However, people in town are real glad that they finally opened, because there's been nowhere to buy a dishcloth, in the interim. For me, the dime store owner's daughter, it's pretty tough, and so it has spurred me now to write a whole book, little essays about place and memory and writing, and so that's going to be my next book, I think, just a little volume.
You got some, 15, 16, 17-year-olds to do the interviewing.
I did, yeah. They were fabulous.
Who did the transcribing?
They did everything.
That's hard.
I sent them out we got some machines that'll help you, where you can stop, you can do like this, and, they'll make it stop so you can be typing. But we sent them out in pairs, and they just had the most fantastic time. We all had the best time doing it. And then every single one of them got into the college of their choice, because they had a published book, of course.
Oh, well, I had not thought of that.
We had a book party, and we sold at the book party. In Grundy, we sold. Everybody got all dressed up. We had a wonderful party. All the kids came and all their families, and we sold 1,500 books, even though there were only 600 people that lived in town. And one kid turned to me and he said, "I guess this is what it's like to be Stephen King." And I said, yeah.
For a day.
For a day, right. For a
That's
day.
wonderful. Well, the photos are wonderful, too. Grundy apparently was a thriving place.
Them in. Yes, Grundy has mirrored the vicissitudes of the coal mine industry, and that was a boom town. It's gone from boom to bust, and in a new incarnation again. Now it's got a law school and a community college and a pharmacy college. So suddenly Grundy's a college town.
Reading through those interviews that your high school kids did, the 2 places that they loved, that the old timers talked about when they were young, they liked to hang out at the dime store, the Ben Franklin, your father's store, and the drugstore. They loved that drugstore.
Oh, yeah.
Apparently they all met their spouses there. Yeah. They all listened to music there.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, at both of these places, there were lunch counters. So this was the place where you had a cup of coffee, or a cherry Coke, or a vanilla Coke, or just whatever. Yeah. And, this is where everybody gathered, because it was a really isolated little town, which gave a sense of enormously strong sense of community. And I'm telling you, I heard the best stories that I will ever hear in my life there, and I'm still writing them down.
Those stories, I know this because I've been reading your books since the first. Are there 18 now works of fiction?
I think it's
16.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, but
it's amazing.
Who cares?
And the stories
It's
from
such a pleasure to do this work. It really has.
Well, the stories from your childhood are in the books.
Yeah.
I mean, I run into them and.
My time in Alabama's in the books. Alabama's a pretty colorful place to go to.
Well, when you were there, you worked for the news, and working for the news,
gives you a chance to ask total strangers very personal questions. Go inside their houses and everything. I just loved it. I would recommend every young novelist to take a job as either a newspaper reporter or a social worker for a while.
Social work will serve as the link between what we've been talking about and the mental hospital.
Absolutely.
You have a new book.
Yes.
Guests on Earth.
Yes.
And it is, in a way, a historical novel. Of course,
it's historical
It's not about
fiction.
Napoleon Bonaparte, but it is set in a hospital in Asheville, North Carolina.
Yes, but I would have to say, if we're going to call it historical fiction, we'd have to have the emphasis on the fiction. Because it is indeed sat in Highland Mental Hospital in Asheville, North Carolina, which is where Zelda Fitzgerald was a patient for the last 13 years of her life, from 1936 to 1948, or 12 years, I guess, of her life. And I was always, I guess, fascinated with the Fitzgeralds,
of course,
and everything about them, as every bookish young person in America was, and always so interested in them, and read everything they wrote, everything about them. And then at a certain point, it actually happened that our stories kind of came together, because my dad was a patient at Highland Mental Hospital in the mid-50s. And so I visited him there and got a real sense of that hospital and the Grove Park Inn, where we went to lunch, and of course where Scott stayed when he visited Zelda.
Yeah.
But so as a child, I was there visiting. And then decades later, my son Josh, who was schizophrenic, was a patient there for both inpatient and outpatient situations for 3 years, 3 very helpful years. And at that point, I was visiting all the time, and I became obsessed, fascinated with the awful fire that had ended Zelda's life, along with 8 other women who were in a locked ward on the top floor of one of the buildings. And I have to say, it was locked for their own safety, because
they weren't
had shock treatments. No, they would, if they awakened during the night after having had insulin shock, they would be disoriented. So a nurse was checking on them. But it was one of the worst hospital fires that's ever happened in this country, and it was set, and the mystery is still unsolved. So in this novel, I have created a whole cast of characters, including, of course, Zelda, and a series of, I hope, plausible events leading up to the fire itself. And and I have a solution for the mystery of the fire. But
you have a culprit, perhaps.
I have a culprit, but mainly I think I have really wanted to examine. I wanted to write a novel that would walk this very thin line between sanity and insanity, and ask the question: who's crazy and who's not? And do we even know? Can we even tell? And I guess I wanted to show that very real lives are lived within these illnesses too. And the more research I did, the more interesting people I found that had either worked at or been patients at Highland Hospital, and did lots of research, ended up with a lot of characters who were begging to be in this book.
Well,
so
you keep Zelda. Zelda is the person in the book of the greatest historical fame. We all know who Zelda was, but she is not your protagonist. I mean,
she's not my
protagonist. This is in a way, an orthodox historical fiction, because there's a character who is observing the historically famous character, and that's your Evelina.
Yes.
Now, a couple of things about her that I found interesting, especially, was like the doctor in Walker Percy's Love in the Ruins.
Yes.
Evelina shares patient staff.
Yes, she's a very talented. She's a little piano genius when she arrives, and eventually she becomes an accompanist for all the many theatricals and musical things going on at the hospital, which were really going on.
What is her mental condition?
As a child, she was just having, I think, a real breakdown, because her mother had killed herself, and the very rich man who was keeping the family, didn't know what to do with her. And so her mother had been an exotic dancer in New Orleans.
Well,
and this older lover didn't know what to do with her, so he just shipped her off to Highland Hospital, and where you could live, where, for certain periods of time. And she was not eating. She was, a little wreck of 13 years old.
When she goes there, she's not mentally ill exactly. She's
she's been through a
distressed.
She's been through a horrible shock and a horrible experience with this man's family and all this stuff. So she comes, she becomes healthy. She goes to school. She goes off to the Peabody Music, thing, and but then she comes back again in pretty bad shape, and then she stays on as a staff person. So she is a privileged onlooker, I guess, at all these people's lives.
Well, she is a talented, even a kind of savant as a piano player.
Yes.
But there was a moment in that, there's a little section, it can't be more than a few pages, where Evelina is tempted to go off and join basically a country music group.
Yeah.
And when I read that, I said, that's what Lee wants to do.
Yeah,
she
I
wants to
done
run
it in a minute.
Are you still?
If I could have carried a tune, I would never have written any of these books.
Are you still working at all with some of the Nashville singers? Are you still working on stage with country music and all that? What was the name of that show that you had put together with?
Well,
was it with Marshall?
With Marshall Chapman and Jill and Matraisa Bark. Good old girls.
Good old, of course.
And it is a show which is now being done. I think it's going to be next at Mountain Stage in Charleston, but it's being done in various places. But we do our own version, and just for various charity events and so on. And we love it. It's so much fun for us.
Well, I saw Evelina just so tempted to run off, like running off with the circus,
It is.
running off with the country music gang.
Right.
And then she doesn't. She decides she wants to play. She has commitments there. She's working with, she's working with Zelda.
Yeah.
Zelda as painter, Zelda as dancer.
Zelda as painter is something. Zelda as painter, Zelda as dancer, Zelda as writer.
Yep.
All of these incredible talents that she had. Yeah.
There's a kind of thesis that runs all through Fitzgerald studies, and that is, if only Zelda had begun dancing at 6 like other people, she would have been in the New York Ballet. If only Zelda had begun writing at 4 like you did, she would have become a professional writer. If only Zelda had had art training, she would have been a professional artist. All true. All true, you think?
I don't know.
What?
In theory, all true, because she was so brilliantly talented in each of these areas. But I do think that she was ill. I do think she had one of the major illnesses which set in, like my son was schizophrenic. And I don't think Zelda was schizophrenic, though, which was her diagnosis. I think today, medical opinion is fairly clear on the fact that today she would be diagnosed bipolar. Because after every period of psychosis, she could still write so beautifully, paint so well, do choreograph. She was choreographing like crazy. Everything that happened at the hospital, all these theatricals and so on.
Yeah, there's several
in
performances
real life.
at the hospital.
This was happening all the time. And with if you're schizophrenic, with break after break, you can't get it back quite like she was able to. And finally, at the end, I think the tragedy was just the cure had been worse almost than the illness, because all they had to offer was shock treatments and course after course, and she was just, had really suffered from that.
And she and others were involved with insulin shock therapy, which when people say shock therapy, almost everybody thinks of the electrodes and
electroshock only came in about 48, which was
later.
After, was after the fire.
So insulin shock therapy basically puts the patient into a diabetic coma?
Into a diabetic coma,
From which they are retrieved?
And then they are retrieved at a certain point, but it's just somebody's guess as to when that's a good time. And, it's very dangerous. But, it was all what they had to offer. What they were doing before was metrazole, which is even more dangerous. And before that, they were injecting horse blood into your spine. Remember, this is still, when Zelda's in the hospital, this is still the age of lobotomy, of eugenics, of sterilization. Lobotomies were still being performed all over the South, although not at Highland Hospital. There were several people with botched lobotomies who were there at the time. But this is what we think of as modern, psychiatric care was, is really very recent, very modern.
Well, it looks barbarous, but are we agreed that they meant well. I mean, they were
Exactly.
doing the best they could.
They were doing the best they could. They meant really well, and frankly, shock treatment was effective. You know, it
Yes.
could be quite effective.
Right.
Whether it was insulin shock or later electroshock, they could control
Right.
a lot better.
Right.
But they didn't have the medications that we have. They didn't have any of the, you know, the medicines that we have. And so, and you got to remember too that just to be away from your family in a quiet place, doing things like art, and Dr. Carroll had them walking 5 miles a day, had them doing what he called hortotherapy, all the maintenance of the whole, you know, physical plant.
Gardening saved some of them.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you know, well, he really, in the South, he is the physician that invented occupational therapy. I mean, the idea that, well, you know, if you're mentally ill, you need to do something. You can't just sit around being crazy. And they did wonderful things. It was great.
He and his wife are, in some ways, the heroes of the book. I mean,
They
are so admirable.
But they were so admirable, but they were also very eccentric themselves. You got to admit.
They were
yes,
world
and
travelers.
they are absolutely, like Zelda, they're absolutely as true to life as, you know, as I can make them.
You have this collection of, well, I guess they're mainly women because the dormitories were obviously
Well, I have a young
segregated.
physician that I love,
Oh,
and I have a
yes.
feral boy.
Yeah, who
that I
lives in a
love.
cave.
He lives in a cave, right? But you know, again, true. I mean, based
Pan
upon,
was real, so to
Yeah.
speak.
Oh yeah, based upon a boy who was, you know, raised in a cage by, you know, crazy mountaineers, and was found and brought to Broughton Hospital. I mean, there have been many, you know, many children like this that have been found and, you know, was not walking upright, all this kind
Right.
of things for years. But then he becomes a groundskeeper
Yeah.
at the hospital.
And Evelina really
he
likes
didn't really
him.
become a groundskeeper at that hospital, but so I'm fudging a little bit. But he was in Western North Carolina, was taken to Broughton Hospital. So yeah, Evelina really likes him.
Yeah, they have.
I've always liked feral boys myself.
I was reading along and I thought, oh my,
Oh dear.
oh
right.
my.
Well,
She
there's
seems to be in the cave with the feral boy.
Oh, well, but there's a whole lot, I think, in here about, well, you know, Zelda identifies herself with the salamander.
Yes.
You know,
And the fire.
Yeah, and the fire and the salamander, and there's a whole lot of, and the feral boy is, you know, sort of more creature in a certain kind of way, and so there's a whole lot about nature and transformation in here. I mean, I think that the big themes here to me are really love and all kinds of love. I mean, kinds we cannot name even, and transformation. And I think for me, the kaleidoscope was the big image because it was a world apart. I mean, a completely self-contained world apart in which things were changing all the time. So the kaleidoscope was a big image for me. And it was just a profoundly interesting project. I could not bear to finish this book.
Oh, well, I'm glad you have to finish them.
You have to finish them.
in order to write the next one. No, I thought that was an interesting collection, and we should. I won't give this away. This there won't be any warning. But
I did not
Evelina
know.
has a secret.
Yeah, and also, this is true. I mean, it's always hard when you really do get into writing a novel to control your characters.
Yeah.
But if they're all crazy, it becomes impossible. And so I just didn't really know how this was going to end, and it surprised me.
Well, it doesn't.
I have to say.
It ends decently well.
Yeah,
for,
but
for
it was. But I
most
just
of
didn't
them.
know what it would be. I mean, it was just. You know, when you become just sort of complicit in the book yourself, it's quite an experience for a writer.
I don't think that a person can answer this question in 10 seconds, but when you write a historical novel about, say, as you have, about Highlands Hospital and Zelda Fitzgerald, the ending of that particular part of your novel is known.
Yeah.
So you can't, in a sense, that's not going to be a surprise.
Right.
The surprise
So
is going
that
to...
can't be the most important part of the
can't be
novel.
the center.
This is really Evelina's story.
Right.
It's Evelina's story, and a whole lot of it is about, I think, mothers and daughters. And a lot of it is just about all kinds of other bonds, as I say, that we don't even have a name for.
Her mother seemed to care for her very much.
Oh, she did. Yeah.
And it surprised me that through a suicide, she abandons her. And that was an odd moment in the book, I thought.
Well, except that she was really, really on drugs.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
I mean, she was.
Evelina didn't know that.
No,
exactly.
Evelina didn't know that, well, I think she did. I think she knew what was being brought from the cafe. You know what this guy was bringing to her, and so on.
Had you set a book in New Orleans before?
No, but I love New Orleans, and I've spent a lot of time in New Orleans.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, research. I'm sure you wrote it
Oh,
off.
I had to do a lot of research.
I
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
I talked recently with Sina Jeter-Naslund, who keeps having to go to Paris.
Oh, yes.
But
that's right.
New Orleans is
That's
almost almost as good. Well, we only have a few seconds left. Let's go back and tell me again quickly. You're writing a book of essays about the mountains?
Well, actually, the experience of seeing my hometown demolished like that. I mean, I went to see the dime store blown up. Okay, when they were blowing up the whole Main Street and, you know, to widen the river and put the new highways, a ring wall, and raise the town and all that. I mean, we all lose our childhoods. We all lose the places that have been dear to us. But this was so dramatic and so fast. And then this summer they blew up, they got further up the river in the project and blew up my house. And so,
that's
you
terrible.
know, I'm not kidding.
They blew up the family store, they blew up your house.
The house, right, all this. And so somehow this has made me write a series of their short pieces of, their vignettes of memoir, they're short pieces about writing and about memory and about place and people that I knew there. And
do you have a title?
so, Dime Store.
Dime Store. Thank you. Well, we'll all look for Dime Store.
Thank you.
And
Thank
Lee, it's so good to see you again. This has been a pleasure.
This is great. Thanks, Don.
To order this season of Bookmark on DVD, call 1-800-463-8825. Additional information can be found on our website at www.alabamatv.org.